So a British man has been given 5 years imprisonment for owning books, which are all legal. But he does have views that are also legal, but they're extremist. So therefore, he's going to jail. Yeah, you tell me how this works. Anyway, so this is a story I found from Crime Bodge, which is a YouTube channel that everyone should subscribe to. He's a great guy. He covers the ridiculousness coming from British police when they act outside of the law. And usually it's about, things like filming the police and the police all getting pissy about it and then being like, no, we're taking you to jail for filming them, stuff like that. And then there's the occasional story he does, like the police trying to persecute someone, the Met Police YouTube Twitter account that persecuted someone and threatened them because they dared to say that, is all of Team GB black or ethnic, or whatever it was, no, gay or ethnic, sorry. And they threatened him by saying, like, we know your wife's name. Perfectly normal thing to do. So he sued them and won that. And then this is a court case which has come up, which has been convicted, which is just mad. So if you're wondering, go and watch the full thing. We're not going to do all the details here, but Crime Bodge, well worth your time. So if we go to the next link, this is CPS definition of the law he was charged with. So Section 58 of the Terrorism Act. Section 58 makes it an offence to collect or make a record of information of a kind that is likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing an act of terrorism. So, likely to be useful to a person committing or preparing an act of terrorism. What does that mean? I mean, is a penknife likely to be useful? I mean, is that enough?
I'd imagine explosives, something like that, would make sense under this law.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you'd be looking for if you were being serious about it. Or to possess a document or record containing information of that kind. The maximum sentence for Section 58 is 10 years imprisonment. Examples include cases such as R.V. Mustafa Abdullah. 8 people were convicted of Section 58 in the year ending in September 2016. You'll notice that there's no need for reasonable suspicion that you are actually going to carry out this attack that they think you're planning. So that is a major shortfall in the legislation. Thank you, Tony Blair. So the case they give is, as I mentioned, R.V. Abdullah. And if you go to the next link, this is The Guardian reporting on R.V. Abdullah, which is an example of this sort of thing. So in here they say, London jihadi found guilty of possessing terror training videos. Muslim convert Mustafa Abdullah was stopped at Gatwick Airport last year as he returned from a trip to Syria. Police examined his phone and computers and discovered gun instruction, video and audio files on guerrilla warfare and combat equipment. The jury was shown a photograph of him in April 2014 of Abdullah with an automatic rifle on his shoulder recovered from his mobile, presumably in Syria there. So you can see the picture of him with the rifle. And his defense was he went to Syria for humanitarian work, which...
What kind of humanitarian work involves a rifle?
I mean, if you're shooting ISIS, I could count that as humanitarian, but there's no evidence of that. And not seeming to be telling the full story there. And then his phone containing the instructions for how to use firearms and guerrilla tactics, so on and so forth. He travelled, I think it was like to Germany, then Sweden, and then came to the UK, and the British police stopped him and charged him with this. Okay, that seems like a place you could charge someone and a usefulness for this law. And as you can see there, a guy who's just come from Syria with that kind of stuff on his phone, yeah, okay, I can see the reasoning. The jury deliberated for 12 hours and found him guilty of 13 offences of possessing documents likely to be useful to a person committing an act of terrorism. The videos on his phone were showing how to use weapons, as I mentioned, and there were also videos preaching fundamental Islamic doctrines such as jihad against the non-believers. So, yeah, I mean, good job. I mean, this is the kind of guy you'd think they'd be looking for. So let's go back to Crime Bodge, the guy they've just charged. So in here, as he mentions, they jail a guy for owning 3 books. If we go to the first clip, this is the intro clip here, and I'm just going to play and let Crime Bodge explain it.
It's a depressing prospect to defend somebody else's offensive beliefs, but protecting your own right to free speech and freedom of thought inevitably means having to protect everyone else's, regardless of how reprehensible those beliefs may be. Nicholas Brock, a 53-year-old man from Berkshire, has been sentenced to 5 years for having what the judge described as a toxic right-wing ideology. This man had no links with any terror organisations. He had no plans to undertake any terrorist activity. What he had was 3 books in his possession, all of which can be purchased legally online. Those books were The Anarchist Cookbook, Knife Fighting Techniques from Folsom Prison, and Kill or Get Killed. None of these books are prohibited, and the mere owning of them is not an offence.
So a book on close combat history, a book on self-defense, and a book, The Anarchist Cookbook, of course, containing instructions that are freely available and legal to own on how to make bombs and Molotov cocktails, things like this. Like, sure, it could be suspect, I agree. And you'll see why he's slightly suspect with his beliefs as well, as to why you would be interested, but not criminal. That's the thing. None of those books are criminal things to own. You can own them. That's fine. So where's the crime? So if we go to the BBC link here, they're saying Maidenhead far-right extremist jailed for terrorism offences. I love how they put extremist in quotes there, as if they're disbelieving it, but okay. I mean, I'd say he's an extremist from his views, which, just to be clear, don't like, disavow, but not criminal. It's not criminal to hold these views. So a right-wing extremist has been jailed for possessing manuals on knife fighting and making explosives, the Anarchist Cookbook and the knife fighting book there, both legal to own. Police found a hoard of Nazi-era daggers, far-right literature, and a framed Ku Klux Klan certificate in Nicholas Brooks' bedroom in Berkshire. And as you can see the picture there, that's his bedroom. Bit of a weirdo, still lives with his mum, has a bunch of SS knives that he's presumably brought on the internet, other Nazi memorabilia and whatnot. Weird, creepy even, but not illegal. None of those things are legal to own.
I mean, if I did walk in there, I'd think, this guy might have a bit of a screw loose.
Yeah, certainly. That's why the investigation certainly warranted. But did he break the law? Did he threaten anyone?
Doesn't seem like it, no.
So they say he was jailed for 4 years at Kingston Thames Crown Court. Incorrect. It's 4 years and plus 1 year on license after he served the 4 years. So that's why Crime Watch says 5 years. Brooke collection included a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf manifesto, weird way of putting it, and a video of a white supremacist attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. I mean, this is pretty clear evidence that he is a right-wing extremist. Well, Nazi extremist, I'm going to say, because I don't think Nazism is right-wing. I think it's socialist, because it's race socialism. But anyway, different conversation. So, I mean, he's got the videos, he's got Mein Kampf there. Does he have a reasonable excuse? It's like, I study this stuff or anything like that. No, but even then, not illegal to own any of these things. I mean, if you want to read Mein Kampf, go for it. It's a garbage book, but whatever. So Judge Peter Lodder QC told him, "It is clear from the wide range of other material found on your computer and from your hard drive that you're a right-wing extremist." Sure, if you want to describe him like that, but not a crime. Not a crime. Your enthusiasm for this repulsive and toxic ideology is demonstrated by graphic, racist, Islamophobic, and white supremacist iconography that you have stored. Where's the crime? Like, he owns this stuff. Yeah, it's pathetic, but it's not a crime. Like, if he wanted to own a bunch of communist stuff, he wanted to own statues of Lenin and Stalin and, symbols to the Workers' Party of Korea or whatever, still wouldn't be a crime.
That'd be equally as strange, though, if you just had, like, a shrine to Lenin in your house.
Yeah, or the black flag of Islam, ISIS flag or a bunch of stuff. Yeah, suspect, worthy of investigation maybe. But not a crime. Nothing criminal there. Because he's just thinking. He's not doing anything. I mean, there was no evidence, as they mentioned, of him preparing an attack, other than he owned some books that are legal to own.
Yeah, I don't really know how they could justify, just based on him owning lots of stuff, how's that associated with terror? Just because they assume that him being far right is an inevitable thing that he would be a terrorist.
Like, you own
That's
the
an
Anarchist
assumption
Cookbook,
there.
and you're, far right. Sure, suspect, but both of those things legal, no crime there. And therefore you're going to make a terrorist act. No real evidence, I'm sorry. There's nothing there. I mean, in the previous example with Abdullah, he'd been to Syria. You could see pictures of him with rifles in Syria. Pretty reasonable to suspect that, yeah, okay, you've had combat training. You could be carrying out a terrorist attack. Why have you come back to the UK after converting to Islam? What's this about? But with this chap...
Along that vein, though, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that he had lots of knives, and he had a book on how to use knives.
Yeah,
and
but
it's
they're
like
ceremonial knives as well. One of the things. Those things will break if you use them, because they're just things you buy off the internet. They're not proper knives.
I mean, I obviously agree that it shouldn't be criminal, but at the same time, I'm trying to understand why they're actually arresting this guy.
I'm siding with them on the side that it's suspect, it might be worthy an investigation, but there's no evidence there of him committing a crime. And his defence defended it on that basis. Edward Butler, defending, says there was no evidence that his client intended to put or carry out an attack. Which there wasn't. So, what? Brooke of Lancaster Road previously told police he had an interest in military memorabilia, which stemmed from his love of Action Man as a child. Yeah, not buying that, because you've got the New Zealand mosque shooting on your hard drive as well, and I'm just like, did that stem from your love of Action Man? I don't think so. Anyway, so the head of counter-terrorism policing South East said the material Brock had in his possession is dangerous and concerning. Could be concerning. I don't know how it's dangerous. I mean, none of that stuff is being used for anything dangerous, but okay. He had books which would provide techniques on how to fight, assisting someone who was potentially preparing a terrorist act. Maybe. But again, not a crime. Like, he owns these books, perfectly legal to own. I mean, they're couched in the language of self-defense, presumably, except the Anarchist Cookbook, perhaps. But even then, it's a legal book to own. There is nothing illegal about owning it.
I've read some of it, and it's interesting stuff. I can understand why someone would want to read through it, but, you know, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to own if you're just curious. I also have a book by Che Guevara talking about guerrilla warfare. It doesn't mean I'm going to actually go out and go into the trees with a band of people with guns. It just means I'm interested in that.
Like, I've got 2 Qurans. I have no plans to go to London Bridge on Friday or something. Well, I've got plenty of books on North Korea there. I've got communist books. So, you know, that doesn't mean I'm a communist. It's such silly arguing, and they put this guy in jail over it. I'm in flabbergasted, because, I mean, what if they raid my house and they're just like, yeah, you've got these communist books, you're a communist terrorist. Okay, well, I mean, what am I going to argue? I don't own the books? Anyway, so if we go to the next clip, this is from Crime Watch again, who just did some digging into the judge who did this, and it's revealing, let's say, with the fact that with cases of Islamists, he's very lenient. But with cases such as this man, who could be described as the far right, not so much. So let's play this.
It's just a shame that Judge Lotta doesn't hold consistent views toward other disciples of toxic ideology that appear before him. In 2019, he delayed sentencing a teenage supporter of Islamic terrorism who'd been planning random attacks on innocent members of the public with a hunting knife and had publicly announced his intention to stab people in the face and raise money to join ISIS. The judge wasn't happy with the first probation's report on the defendant, I assume because it was unfavourable to him, and he therefore granted a 6-week recess, insisting that a report be undertaken by someone who has experience in dealing with terror cases, aka someone who would be more favourable to the defendant's motives. When the teenager was finally sentenced, the judge chose to blame the game rather than the player, mitigating the man's murderous intent by saying, "I very much hope that you take advantage of the programs available to you in prison and realise radicalisation is not the way forward for you." He then handed him 3 years. Nicholas Brock was given 5 years and spared the apologetic send-off that's characteristic of Judge Peter Lotta.
So, I mean, the difference there, the Islamist made a public, his public views, his public intentions known, that he wanted to stab people, was raising money for ISIS. That's a crime. Like, there you go. That's easy peasy. I mean, that's evidence of him wanting to commit an act of terrorism. Owning books? No. And yet one guy gets his, case suspended and then has his 3 years slapped on him. Whereas this guy who owns books, which are legal, gets 4 years. Plus 1 for license.
It is definitely backwards. The only thing I could see really there that could explain that is the fact that the Islamic guy was, 16, 17? And,
Plenty of terrorists at that age, though.
I know. I'm not excusing him, obviously, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of why he would do such a thing. Like, other than, of course, just being a hypocrite, which is probably likely.
It's just being utterly biased. So this isn't the first time the Anarchist Cookbook has been on trial either, a legal book to own in the UK. So this is a trial in which the BBC titles it Anarchist Cookbook Trial, Waste of Time and Money. Interesting how it's a waste of time and money here, but in this case of this Nazi guy, not so much. Strange. So they say in here, a student cleared of possessing terrorist information after he was found with a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook. Says his trial was overzealous waste of time and money. Joshua Walker, 27, from Bristol, travelled to Syria in the summer of 2016 to help a Kurdish militia group. You'll see here how this has more weight than the owning books guy, because he's gone to Syria. And then the police want to make sure you weren't fighting for ISIS or the PKK, for example. I mean, presumably he was fighting for the YPG or whatever, Kurdish group in Syria that's not listed as a terrorist group yet. But the PKK, for example, are listed as a terrorist group by the UK. So if he's been fighting for them, worthy of investigation, they did it, and then everyone's like, yeah, that was a waste of time just because he owns an Anarchist Cookbook. Isn't good enough evidence. But for the other chap, that's enough to not only do the trial, it's enough to put him away for 5 years. Interesting. So, is it just that, that guy could be seen as believing in terrorism there? That's the point I'm getting. It's not just belief. So why bother? Why do they bother with this? Come on, we all know the answer. Because there's a wider conversation going on about all of this, in which there are too many Muslim terrorists on the British terrorist list. That's the problem. Not that there are too many Muslim terrorists, but there are too many on the list, because then it looks disproportionate. Like the Prevent program is trying to target Muslims, not that there are a lot of Muslim terrorists in the UK, and therefore that's why they're overrepresented. So if we go to the next link here, you can see this is an article you wrote about
It is indeed, yeah.
exactly this kind of nonsense policing, in which after being criticised for there being too many Muslims on the Prevent scheme, they decided to investigate more far-right terrorism, and the pensioner threat went up 90%.
Yeah, so I think there was political pressure supposedly put on the people who are at Prevent, I assume, and in trying to inflate the figures for the far right, it turned out that actually it was just loads of pensioners that were being classified as extremists.
I love the chat here. Diversify the terrorist list. Essentially, that's it. Diversity inclusion for the terrorism list. So you wrote here the figures for 2019-2020. 97 people over the age of 60 were flagged for Prevent, which is the strategy for identifying extremists. This was double of the previous year, 53, and 3 times the number for 2016-2017. Many security experts believe the majority of those extremist pensioners would be considered far-right terror suspects. These figures come after the Prevent strategy was branded toxic in 2015 for predominantly targeting those from a Muslim background. The comments came 2 years prior to the 2017 suicide bombing at Manchester Arena. Not to mention all the other litany of terrorist attacks that led to that. Overwhelmingly Islamic. Surprise, surprise. So if we go to the graphs, also for just Islamist terror, like you can see that sort of thing. But if we it's right at the bottom, the graph. So I think it might be right at the bottom, but there's like a list. You have a graph, yeah, there. So you can see the referrals for Islamist terror dropping like a stone since 2015. Interesting. I'm glad Islamist terror's dried up. Glad ISIS didn't come about. Anyway, so if we go to the next link, you'll have The Guardian pushing this exact same thing from the media here. Fastest growing UK terror threat is the far right, says police. Sure, but if it's going from 2 to 4, that might be the fastest growing, 100%, but that's not representative of a huge spike in a massive issue. And thank God for the Global Terrorism Index that does actually consolidate these things. So go to the next link. This is the Global Terrorism Index. It's free. Just Google it. Check it out yourself. They do it every year. And if we go to the first image, this is what is in there for far right and far left terror incidents in the West between 1970 to 2019. And as you can see, right at the tail end there, far right terrorism incidents, yeah, they are going up, along with left-wing terrorism incidents there, just not as much. But that never gets a mention, does it? But as you can see, historically, comparison there, not too much compared to the horror of the 70s with left-wing terrorism.
Surely left-wing terrorism would be going up from 2015 still because of all the Black Lives Matter stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it is going up a little bit there. I mean, I don't know how they class far left specifically with regards to Black Lives Matter, but that'll be an interesting question. But if we go to the next one here, I mean, this is just a map of ISIL-related terrorism deaths. I mean, not even incidences. And this is just ISIL, never mind all the other Islamist groups. And as you can see, it's not like it doesn't affect the West or anything. In fact, it's 90% of terror deaths globally every single year because of Islamist groups. And then when you look in the West, yeah, it's overwhelmingly disproportionate again. As you can see, France being particularly harmed by this, but also Germany, Sweden, the UK, US, obviously. It's just BS to say that the far right, it's a growing threat, that's true, but to say that it's like the biggest thing ever in the West, no. Islamist terror is still the biggest thing.
I'm not sure if you saw in my article, but I think it was either someone for MI5 or MI6 or something, actually came out and said, like, we're being pressured to inflate the threat of the far right because of political pressure, and that's the only reason that these numbers are going up, pretty much. That's
which
what
would
he was
explain
saying,
that conviction, because it's like, well, look, this guy owns 2 books, they're legal. He owns, dumb paraphernalia for the Nazis. I mean, cringe, disgusting, but legal. He has views which are gross, but legal. And yeah, he gets 5 years in jail.
It's a political conviction to bump up the numbers, it seems to me.
Yeah. I don't like the guy at all. I don't have to even meet the guy. I know I'm not going to like the guy, but still. That just looks like a political imprisonment. Like, I'm sorry, he hasn't done anything illegal. He just has retarded views. Anyway, so we can also just see this for yourself. Like, if you just go to the Wikipedia list of terrorist incidents in the UK, and then we'll just run it backwards, shall we? Let's go from now until the last far-right terror attack and just see how this plays out. So, 2020, Reading stabbings. Kahiri Sadala, a fake asylum seeker, shouting Allahu Akbar, kills people with knives, killing 3 and injuring 3 in Reading. 2020, Sturtham stabbing. Right at the bottom, John. You want to go to the bottom. Other way around. So, Sturtham stabbing. Sudesh Arman, wearing a fake suicide vest, was shot dead by armed police after stabbing 2 people. Inmates at Whitmore Prison in Cambridgeshire, wearing realistic fake suicide vests and carrying improvised bladed weapons, stabbed one prison officer several times, causing him serious injuries and harming several others. To the next one. 2019, London Bridge stabbing. 2 people were killed in the attack and 3 were left injured. The attacker, 28-year-old Usman Khan, was shot dead by the police. 2018, Mahid Mahmoud, a Dutch national from a Somali family, stabbed 3 with a knife at Manchester Victoria Station. Mahmoud shouted Allahu Akbar and long live the Caliphate during the attack. 2018 Westminster Car Attack. A Ford Fiesta ran down pedestrians outside the Palace of Westminster. Suspect Salah Khatar, a 20-year-old British citizen from Birmingham, who entered the UK in 2010 as a refugee from Sudan. You notice how many refugees keep popping up here. 2017 Parsons Green bombing. A London tube train was targeted and witnesses reported flash and bangs. 30 people were injured. An 18-year-old Iraqi asylum seeker, Ahmed Hassan, who came here illegally, was arrested. Then we get to a far-right terror attack. I mean, it's just pathetic. It's this list of just endless, like, Islamist terror attack, and then the spotty one from the far right, and it's like, you can't lie to me. I'm sorry, we have the attacks. It's not even we have reports or something. I don't know. These are big events. And then we get Finsbury Park Mosque, 2017. So you have to go back all the way that far for a whole bunch of refugees from the Religion of Peace, and then you get a far-right one. Finsbury Park Mosque, Derek Osborne, 27-year-old British male, drove a van into Muslim worshippers near Finsbury Park Mosque. He shows no signs of racism or radicalization until 3 weeks before the attack. According to his wife, she said that he had been angered by 3 girls, a BBC docudrama about Rochdale child sex ring abuse, and he began to accuse all Muslims of being rapists. So he was radicalized by the BBC. It's something you don't hear about, do you?
Well, I don't know about that.
He literally, his wife is saying that he watched the docudrama about 3 girls, had no real opinions on Islam, and then just went nuts. I mean, just started getting radicalized. So it's like, okay, you can say that all these other guys are being radicalized by stuff, but I just hate how they're like, look, the far right's on the rise, And I'm like, yeah, sure, okay, we can investigate it. But when a guy has some books and opinions, it's not crime. And when you just look at the numbers, I'm sorry, it is overwhelmingly Islamic. I don't know if you don't like that, but that's the truth.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, really, because it's even just someone who loosely follows the news can tell that the threat of Islamic terror is obviously the most significant one, and anyone else trying to inflate either the left or the right, at least in the UK, they're just crazy, aren't they? Like, there aren't really very many kind of left or right wing terror cases. It's just Islam that's the problem in the UK.
Overwhelmingly. I mean, from a population that's what, like 8% of the population, something like that? Mm-hmm. I don't even know.
Ridiculously overrepresented.
Yeah, like 90% of the terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, it's strange. And
but yeah, guys with books and opinions, which are gross, but both legal, that can get you in jail. So I guess burn your books. I don't know what to say.
If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.